Hats Off, a collection of poetry and stories by Bruce Eardley Mitchell. This collection is dedicated to my wonderful wife, Barbara Lee Mitchell. This collection of poems and shorts is an attempt to recreate some of my experiences in or near places I have lived, worked, and played. These loci represent the literal ground of my memory, but like most interior places, they are not located on any map. I tried to create these pieces in a rough chronological order, but time and my imagination kept moving me back and forth in a fluid state of encounters and interconnections. The most formative events are registered in the freedom of my country youth. But time slyly, inexorably escorted me into the more confined space of an urban adulthood. Even with this universal path from open to closed, the events, places, and feelings of my life have become the cells of my body, constantly evolving, dying, living, determining. This singleness of self is true for each of us, but equally true is our communal need to enhance ourselves through the actions and stories of others. To facilitate this need for connection, there seems to be some element in the human brain that registers stories and harbors them as common ground for understanding each other. My humble hope is that some of my memories will connect to you and your own heart's complex journey. Kansas City, Missouri. Poems: Prisoners, Boxy, Little Blue School, The Nun. Prisoners. This poem was based on my first encounter with the cruelty and senselessness of our prison system. Prisoners. Long gray lines of black men hammering on huge posts which would be removed at dusk by a John Deere tractor, entranced me in the summer hazes of my wandering youth. These men, chained together, swinging 10-pound hammers, glistened with sweat, and grunted as the sledges struck heavy on creosoted poles, driving them down inch by swing into fallow earth that would be seeded by someone else. I would visit these men summer after summer, watching the enormous power of their arms ridiculed by machines that removed their work and left it lying scattered, useless. And I began to understand the futility of some men's lives, caught in circumstances with no escape, except in the eyes of a little boy who had yet to meet his own John Deere. Boxy. Perhaps the first love of our lives is our first dog, and this was mine. Boxy. Aside from running through our youth, Boxy served the household by being an excellent hunting dog. When the air turned cool and the sugar maples erupted in geysers of red and orange, Boxy could hardly be contained. The tension in the week would build, and by Friday night, when Dad would come home exhausted and settle into a six-pack of Millers, with the ladies sitting coyly on the quarter moon, hardtack, bought in bulk, wrapped in wax paper, and Limburger cheese, the rotting stench driving us all from the kitchen, Boxy would jump and roll and moan with the need to hunt. On Saturday morning, as we ate our bacon and eggs, we could hear her barking between the house and the car, back and forth, braying for the adventure to begin. It was a wonderful time. We had an air hole in the trunk of the car, and once Boxy was shut in, she was perfectly quiet. For now the waiting was over, and the serious business of her life would begin. Little Blue School. In rural Missouri, there was no kindergarten to prepare you for first grade in elementary school. All grades were seated in one-room schoolhouse, and in my case, with a horrible teacher who viciously slapped a girl and prompted me to put a vengeful black snake in her desk. The snake and I were both expelled. Little Blue School. My particular modus operandi was to mouth mimic almost everything Miss Weeks said. Occasionally this would result in real laughter, but usually it just caused a small ripple of appreciation. And my dismissal to the dunce chair outside. Serious business in January. My memories are unpleasant. Sitting in the spirit-deadening cold with my tall conical hat, staring at the frozen cornfields beyond our little playground, or at the outhouse, an ugly little shed that saved me from total isolation. When a kid did come out to use the toilet, he or she would ignore me. But at recess, en masse, that same kid was merciless, dancing around me, shouting, "Dunce, dunce!" in the hope that I would get out of my chair to fight, and Miss Weeks could be summoned, paddle in hand. The Nun. After being expunged from Little Blue with my serpent friend, a nearby Catholic school seemed my only option, until I closed that religious door by hitting a girl in the desk behind me who was unraveling the beads in the Navajo belt my father had given me. I was beaten with a willow switch and sent home to wander in the forest of what was to become my third grade. The Nun. The Nun moved like an enormous ship down the aisles, slow, heavy, immutable. She could not be swerved, cajoled, or humored. There was no personality, only ironclad authority, as she headed toward the blackboard. Her weight tilted the entire room, desks, books, ink, children, all sliding precipitously into the lesson. My mind, like a star being pulled into a black hole, did not comprehend the dynamic of the gravitation, only its power. Questions did not exist in this new universe. Silence, order, discipline, my last chance. Charcoal. This poem describes the day my father lost his briquette company in the Kansas-Missouri floods of 1951. Charcoal. Charcoal is made from the ancient process of burning wood, compressing and treating its carbon into hardened briquettes that will burn down into ash while cooking thick sirloins that drip animal fat into new life as the oldest of paints to decorate the cave walls of my unassailable youth. I remember Father, blackened by the fire that took his factory, coming down a neighbor's dusty road in long strides of pain, to pick up the child and hold him sliding in sweat and tears, so that he would know that wood must burn to stay alive. St. Louis, Missouri. Dynamometer. Cummins, Missouri diesel. The doopy. Dynamometer. We moved to St. Louis, where Dad became president of Cummins, Missouri Diesel Sales Corporation, and put me to work in the Cummins garage at age 12. The age he left his grandparents' farm to work odd jobs near Eugene, Oregon. One, trapping mink with an old trapper. As a young man, Dad worked his way through the Montana School of Mines in Butte, Montana, mining copper at night and fighting bare-fisted for money in Butte on the weekends. My brother and I miss him greatly. As Hamlet said of his father, quote, "He was a man, take him for all in all." Dynamometer. I remember the summers in Dad's garage as sick Diesel's bowels were being checked. Pistons, heads, cylinders, valves, injectors, all adjusted and torqued by sweating surgeons sliding under their patients on creepers, crab-like doctors scudding on rollers of steel. These men were my idols, greased to rumble, swearing at each other and the dynamometer as it screamed to test the heart of one more engine made to run on simulated highways of stress. But who measured RPMs for these healers to ensure that they could last the road? That pistons wore coats of Prussian blue to ease them through hard eons of usage? Or that their heads were ground perfectly to maintain clearances when half crazy? Or that their cylinders were calibrated to take the wear of O-rings from within? Or that their valves were well seated to hold in energy, release the waste? These questions deepened every summer as I returned to the dynamometer's roar and listened to diesels running full throttle. Cummins, Missouri diesel. Pleasures of work, my first job. Cummins, Missouri diesel. As grease monkey, my work began in the boiler room, cleaning oil and grease from disemboweled diesel engines. The steam shot from a long gray snake of hose tipped with a slanting nozzle of copper pipe, with a shut-off valve in the midsection to control the white laser of heat. Every morning, piles of diesel parts lay waiting from the night shift. Oil pans, cylinders, rocker arms, crankshafts, pistons, injectors, engine blocks, all to be cleaned and stacked on the other side of the bleak room. I loved this job, almost invisible within my steam cloud, cutting through time's grime, rendering the used and greasy into miracles of shiny potential. Of all the parts, the crankshafts were my favorite, their stainless steel shafts and convoluted ellipsoids emerging radiant with power, mystery, and grace. The Doopy. In the transition between our move from Kansas City to St. Louis, my brother Kirby and I were put in Wiggins Ozark Camp, where this bizarre congruence of Haitian folklore and our young minds intersected. The Doopy. We ended the 9th day of camp with our routine game of capture the flag, playing until we could barely see. After the last kid had been caught, we ambled off to our cabins, got our flashlights and dop kits, went to the bathhouse to use the toilet, brushed our teeth, and returned to our bunks. There were 16 kids in my cabin, Potawatomi, and each of us became, starting on that night, the willing sacrifices to Philippe's capacity for storytelling. That night, as we all lay staring up into the darkness, tasting our toothpaste, he began to initiate us into the spirit world. His voice was low and sonorous, hypnotic. I want all of you to look into the darkness around you and imagine that you are part of it, that your bodies do not exist, that your spirit is floating in the darkness. When I was your age, I lived with my grandmother in Haiti. It was she who taught me about the Doopy. A moment ago, when I told you to let yourselves float into the dark, the essences that momentarily left your body was your Doopy. And it is a powerful thing. It can hurt people. A spirit, free and dangerous. Each night, Philippe would deliciously heighten our terror through more and more stories. The whooping boy, the Doopy dog, the rolling calf, the blood river, the three-legged horse, all becoming part of our dreams, our nightmares. For the rest of that summer, and for a few of us, the rest of our lives, we released our own doopies at night, seeking fathers in the darkness we had become. Ontario and Yukon Territory. Poems: The Pecan Tort, Alaska Jims, No Fold Poker, Whitefish, Corners, Inuit. The Pecan Tort. In our fishing trips to Canada, we met the owner of a fishing logging camp, Bob Lessard, who offered me a summer job working with some very rough men, trappers in the winter who became fishing guides or loggers in the summer. I was 14, the only kid in an environment of unwritten rules, defined in the tone of male voices. Not through a spoken message, but in the tone of the voice, demanding a keen ear and fast feet. The Pecan Tort. The female cook made 2 pecan torts for each man in the logging camp, only 2, and they were prized beyond any treasure. Every taste was measured by what it took to fly in and preserve: sugar, butter, eggs, flour, mace, lemon, brandy, pecans, raisins, and cream, all made into delicate cakes of caring in the rough world of logs hauled to booms, behind tugboats, to the paper mills of Fort Frances, through blue miles of Canadian lakes that sometimes took men dancing across timber with their long-hooked pikes, suddenly disappearing beneath the closed enormity of floating trees that were to be milled into money. For these loggers, life was serious, so when torts began to disappear at night, there were dark thoughts, satisfied in the moonlight of retribution, when the cook waited with her cleaver and took the little finger of the one man who could not control his appetite for pecan torts made special. Alaska Jims. Before Alaska became a state in 1959, we traveled the Alcan Highway. Empty, shock-destroying miles of dirt, gravel, stunted pines, and ravenous, omnipresent mosquitoes, feasting on the fresh meat of sleepless, bug-slapping campers. Alaska Jims was a godsend. Alaska Jims. Alaska Jim was a mail carrier by dog sled long before planes ended his importance to lonely miners, digging in the gold loneliness of crazed decisions made in drink and hope. When those men died along with their world, Jim bought Quonset huts, left by the U.S. Army to house soldiers for the Japanese invasion that never came, in the dark form envisioned, but molted instead into a sign, Alaska Jims. His neon calling truckers off the Alcan Highway of gravel and dirt to beer, hot shower, and bed. Once inside, the driver's red eyes refocused on a giant moose emerging from a sunset lake, painted on the curving walls of Jim's last stand as a hotelier whose fine mural was cut in half each spring by the breaking ice of a Yukon gone mad in upheavals of life inspired by warmth. No one questioned the logic of this yearly ritual, pushing the hut back together with a tractor so that the moose and Jim could be whole. No Fold Poker. In the Friday night poker games at Lessard's, I was a child witnessing some very serious, not-for-children drinking and card playing, where even a hint of dishonesty or insult could result in a broken jaw. No Fold Poker. For Elton and Ojibwa, poker was serious business. Elton had never been in a bank. There was no savings account, no pension fund. Cash was his plan. On this particular night, he was holding about $2,000 and drinking his private bottle of Johnny Walker Black. Elton drank like he played cards, seriously, with no visible concern for the morning, when Johnny Walker would tear his brain open and drain its contents into red and black marbles, incapable of sight. In the searing morning sun, the night would become a poisonous haze of voices speaking underwater, fists slamming on card table, chips and glasses hopping in unison, a chair flying across the room and crashing into a wall, splintering like the ruptured skull that contained the memory, but would lose it in the pain. Whitefish. This poem deals with the familial lessons from an Ojibwa family. Whitefish. Between Rainy Lake and Trout Lake, there is a portage that follows waterfalls up through massive boulders hunched over in cascading torrents of blue and green. In the roaring flow, the Ojibwa families catch whitefish, whose delicate mouths rip open with a hook, but hidden in rushing falls, they are caught by net and rock, dropped simultaneously before and after their invisible forms. One must know to look where the water does not move, where solid existence displaces fluid and reveals itself. After doubly deft movements, twisting netted silver rises, and father and son smile at their perfectly timed maneuver. So long gone, these teams of understanding, when wisdom was suddenly revealed in the water that does not move. Corners. At Lassard's, I often worked in the ice house, ice buried in sawdust, wood chips to keep cold, the blocks cold. Filleting wall-eyed pike, and one day I witnessed the camp cat disappear under the bunkhouse, pursued by the trappers' sled dogs, single file, noses first. Corners. The sled dogs of winter lay mute in a summer's shade, their ears flicking flies, all somber, their enthusiasm for life drained out through their bloody noses. The cat was nowhere to be found, but the loggers were upset and wanted to shoot her or leave a fishhook with meat on it in the ice house. I defended the cat, saying that the dogs had it coming to them, and that they had been taught a valuable lesson. There is risk when you corner an animal, no matter how small. Eventually, the dogs mended and the loggers became trappers, forgetting their summer identities and the harshness of winter. But I remembered the cat and kept her memory like ice in sawdust. Inuit. One of our coastal tribal encounters when bearhook fishing for salmon. Inuit. The path into the Inuit village on the Moose River was soft from use, but protected by tied malamutes that exploded to take our throats before theirs choked on taut lines between pines stunted by permafrost. The barking forest opened to the river of salmon wheels, turning slowly with the weight of water and spawning fish. On the banks of the Moose, long flakes of salmon hung over fires, gaping fillets of orange curing in the thick of rising smoke. We were not welcome, but carried with us new technology, the Polaroid land camera, capable of reducing quickly the life that existed before us into a chemical square of emerging color and forms that had no depth or smell, except that of fluorescent dyes reacting to radiant energy. We were instantly important and took many photographs of smiling families standing before government cabins that confined people to squares of muted shade and form, protected by dogs that should have been left untied. Veradera Cuba. The poem Cuba Libre. Cuba has always had a warm place in my heart. Where my foot was severed on a broken bottleneck, bleeding profusely into Dad's frantic Jeep, and stitched up in an isolated village by an old Cuban who had been a medic in World War I, with no anesthesia, just a piece of wood to bite on. Mom took the Jeep on a long drive to Havana to get morphine and horse serum penicillin that caused me to slip into a semi-coma and an emergency flight to a Miami hospital. To this day, I love that old Cuban who introduced me to the potential for pain to humble and save at the same time. Cuba Libre. Every time the bus bounced, chickens would flutter and cluck in the honey-brown arms of mestizos girls with black hair and smiling, sensuous lips, going to their villages. I longed to be older, to be able to speak Spanish to them, to hold their chickens and make jokes, to be in their kitchens, tasting their lives. Instead, all I could do was sit and look bored, a tourist staring out the bus window at royal palms, tall and stately, but nesting vultures, squat, ugly, waiting. Halfway through the first day, we passed an army caravan. Father commented that they were going to the Sierra Maestra Mountains to kill Fidel Castro, the enemy of Fulgencio Batista and General Motors. I watched them trudging beneath us, a long green and brown river of men in sweat-marked fatigues, guns casually on their shoulders, disappearing into our dust. France. Poems: Les Poutrelles, The Ward, La Roche Tremblante, Ratman, Land, and Lascaux Cave. Les Poutrelles. In my now repeated pattern of outrageous acts, I was expelled from the University of Pacific in Stockton, California, for riding a horse through the girls' dormitory. The dean was not amused. I humbly asked, "Where shall I go?" He enthusiastically responded, "To France. I see you took a semester of French. See your French teacher," whom I greatly respected for her brave history of fighting in the French resistance to German occupation in World War II. She laughed at my thoughtless risk. Hers were real, and suggested Caen, France, her hometown, where I got a job in a brick factory, went to l'Université de Caen, played rugby, broke my leg, and ended up in l'Hôpital de Caen. All the consequences of a horse ride that could have resulted in jail, or worse, someone getting hurt. Lady Luck, a lifetime companion, was riding with me. Bless her. Les Poutrelles. We made building blocks of cement and long poutrelles, of steel rods encased in concrete to make strong support for buildings we would never see. Molded by Romans long dead to what their minds would create in future's time by mixing crushed rock, lime, and water into stately domes, arches, and pillars that still dictate how we think of beauty. In the heavy slush of concrete, we sometimes would spit to see our saliva flow into swirls of hardening gray stone. Just as ancient Roman architects put chalk on soil of unbuilt villas, and wondered if those lines would ever find existence in the soft countryside of black and yellow sunflowers, where rich Romans would enjoy cozy tiled floor heating, hot and cold running water, and wine carried over roads later used by French schoolchildren, carrying their books near the caves of Chauvet, where art predates history and existed in brains thought primal, soaring on walls converted to moving tableaus of lions, rhinos, horses, all flowing into the pubic triangle that still pulses with now, sensual, powerful, hairy vortex of vaulting potential, not realized until the artist dips a finger into the moist center of self and creates the vital magic of mind, not thought, emerging into life with fat and charcoal, ochre and spit. The Ward. This poem is my experience in l'Hôpital de Caen. The Ward. One by one, the orange tips of cigarettes began to disappear, and the ward began to move, softly and inexorably toward the boy. Monsieur Girard was carried, with difficulty and perhaps even great risk, to a bed vacated for him next to the boy. The same two porters removed me from my traction apparatus and carried me to an empty chair at the foot of his bed. The entire ward, 18 men in various contortions, surrounded the blind, softly crying young man and began to touch him, tentatively, gently, wherever we could. Feet, hands, legs, arms, shoulders, delicately massaging the torn face through the body. No words were spoken, but we each, through our hands, tried to talk to the pain, that it was not alone, that we understood, that we felt it. Each hand spoke from its own experience, some firm and steady, some fluctuating between compassion and resolve, some light and afraid. La Roche Tremblante. It's an extraordinary experience in witnessing magic, that of a trembling rock. La Roche Tremblante. To the southeast of Toulouse, there is a country of boulders, huge outcroppings taking the shapes of one's imagination, from earth-thrusting breast to Napoleon's famous hat, all breaking between tall oaks and mottled slivers of sunlight. Within this strange land there is a little-known trembling boulder, attended by an old wretch, waiting for the wandering traveler, a wooden lever in her hand, with a small basket dangling from it, for tips garnered when she makes the 50,000-ton egg move. Ludicrous! But she does, slowly rocking on tiny feet, her dentures grinding in a reptile smile that rattles into gasps as mouths open to the impossible, the unexpected wonder that something ancient and small can move a mountain of stone and step away, leaving a lone lever to pivot up and down under the trembling mass, its basket begging for silver to rain. Rat Man. Paris generously offers the world a full range of human experience in its light and dark alleys of possibility. Rat Man. My wife and I were walking toward the Café de la Paix in the Place de l'Opéra when a clochard approached reeking of alcohol, garlic, cheese, dogs, and urine. He moved to match our avoidance, leaving no space to escape confrontation. When his army coat erupted forth with an enormous black rat and vomiting sounds to accompany my wife's screams and my curses. We faced off, him holding the rat while I made fists that were ridiculed, in the cafes explosions of laughter, c'est faux, emanating from its patrons, while the entertainer danced around our ignorance with his rubber rat held high over his mocking face. We then passed a delightful night sharing dark joy in the primal poses of sudden outrage or honor reduced to shame in the cold eyes of collective jest. Land. This poem is about history's long memory. Land. In 1997, I reconnected with an old friend in the town of Bonac, perched in the Pyrenees. Small stone houses of moss and ivy, overgrown with familial history, green bastions against change. As we walked, I noticed one empty lot, with angry nettles speaking of abandonment, malaise, even hardened rejection. I asked my friend about this lot, and he stopped gazing to tell of a house inhabited by a man offering World War II Jews escape from France by secret routes over the sky's mountains to connect with the Spanish underground, paid for in advance, but collected in full with bullets fired for jewelry into unheard cries above and the innocent town below, which found the mass grave and killed the killer, then razed his house so no one, no human being, will set foot on this shamed earth as long as the earth has memory. Lascaux Cave. In 1958, Mom took Kirby and me to see the 20,000-year-old cave wall art at Lascaux Cave in southwest France, closed to the public in 1963. This extraordinary experience inspired many images, this one on the timelessness of art and, regrettably, violence, the beauty and the beast. Lascaux Cave. The crazed horses and their howling riders are one reddened moment of invasion, the timeless surge of energy into torpor, awakened by the thunder of hoofs, the needs of hidden self caught in a presence so outrageous, so unimagined, that juices come alive, emanating from caves where animal fat and ochre rise on artists' fingers to portray the same events, the now invading sleep, shattering dreams with violence and lust, carrying its madness into the safe sanctity of tribal warmth, tearing it to pieces that must be rejoined but cannot, because the cave wall of the mind will always stay awake to pictures created in the broad daylight of mayhem. So the moment rides down those slopes of unleashed passion toward the queen illusion, standing resolute against attack, her hands uplifted to stop the unstoppable, locked in her role as protector against these heaving chests of change, soaring and flying exertion over her descending form into the cave's abyss and the painted horses of not now. Platte, South Dakota. Last Pheasant. Last Pheasant. Dad loved to hunt, and this poem is an homage to that love's passage. Last Pheasant. I agreed to flush out the pheasant and waited as Father strode ahead to position himself at the other end of the sorghum patch for a decent shot. Finally satisfied that he must be in place, I entered the maze of yellow-brown stalks, holding my 12-gauge sideways to break a swath. I crashed forward, barely hearing the whirling ascent of the cock, accompanied by the explosions of Father's double barrel. Breaking into the open field, I expected to see the downed prey, but saw only Father, like one of the abandoned farmhouses, gray and alone. Chicago, Illinois. KOs. Barb and I were married in 1965 and moved to Chicago, where I worked for Diesel Accessories and Engineering Company, DACO, cold calling on trucking, construction, mining, and steel companies in Gary, Indiana. KO's, a bar in Cicero, was a favorite hangout for me and my customers. KO's. KO's was where a lot of policemen, firemen, and salesmen hung out. There were very few women, except on Fridays when some secretaries from a local factory came to relax. On a particularly frigid Friday night, KO's was doing just that, humming with closeness and suspended warmth, as if the cigarette smoke was conversing in the crowd. Because of this safe mood, we were all slightly jarred when the January cold cut into our established coziness, accompanied by the son of a bitch of KO's Mina Bird. The entire bar shifted in annoyance as the late arrival, a tall woman, turned from shutting the heavy door and melted into us, gobsmacked by her rising moon beauty, ephemeral and soft, until you met those searing points of obsidian coming out from her black cowl's shadow. Every man was lost. Evanston, Illinois. Paperboy. Words, words, words. Taking a leak in the woods. Gypsy blood. Lawn boys. Prairie moon. Paperboy. In 1969, we moved to Evanston, just north of Chicago, where I had found a job at Evanston Township High School as an English teacher, beginning a 32-year career that was my life's calling, my salvation. Lady Luck was still with me, still holding the leather reins of my fate. Paperboy. I can hear the paperboy coming, 5:30 in the morning, his loose muffler coughing house to house through the cold mist. Next follows the familiar slap of paper on walk, and this duet of delivery moves on, attenuates. Ah, Paperboy, I've never seen your face, yet you launch my days, set the tone. One morning you were absent, and things went poorly from start to finish because you weren't there. Were you sick? Did you drink too much? Was your girlfriend pregnant? Have you quit? Strange how the unseen aspects of routine touch us deeply when they disappear, leaving us disconnected, off-center, lost, alone, as we sip our coffee without words. Words, words, words. This is a small snapshot of teaching in South 109, day by day, year by year, my blessing. Words, words, words. The teacher stared out his window into the school courtyard. The flowering crab's tiny petals white and pure, the tulip magnolia's blossoms pink and ephemeral, the copper beech's leaves purple and suggestive. Between classes he tried to find solace in this calming tableau, but accepted it as merely a temporary respite to gird himself for the next onslaught, the fifth tidal wave of his day crashing onto his beachhead in South 109. Like the previous tides, It would recede in 45 minutes, pull everything into itself and out the door. Desk, books, cabinets, students, all swept up in a powerful undercurrent of energy. On this particular Wednesday, he reluctantly turned from his courtyard tranquility and smiled weakly at the entering seniors, took roll amid the excited banter of 25 teenagers, and with a clearing of the old authoritarian throat, began his 1,000th discussion of Hamlet's indecisiveness with his own decision to gird himself for the day's potential, to teach. Taking a Leak in the Woods. This poem is self-explanatory. Taking a leak in the woods. When a boy, I used to take a leak in the woods, preferring them to the limited porcelain of custom. In the day, the sun was clear and blazing as my diffusion exploded with yellow translucence, while at night the cool moon shimmered in shadows as my silver stream disappeared into its whispers. Separate and secret, these beautiful worlds opened my heart to outer and inner truths, clear and warm, mysterious and cool, garnered through the simple act of urination. Now an old man sequestered in walls of age, I still seek the glorious openness of youth, and sometimes, between silent houses at night, I smile while pissing on hostas not mine. Oh, baby, all right. Gypsy Blood. This poem is to never underestimate the spirit world and its power. Gypsy Blood. When my father-in-law died, he was entombed in a crypt, separating two Romanian brothers whose feet were tied to test their escape, but aided with hard cash in the pockets of 7 suits interred with them for runs to spirit worlds in India and Turkey and the Balkans. Their history in air roads not marked on any map, except those of blood beating thick through the centuries of flight and guile, fooling even death, as each night they set off alarm systems built to protect all the mausoleum's stored wealth, but worthless against brothers who break beams and shatter the peace of the upright dead, who thought they had escaped the rush of unholy passion that once cast out the heathen Romani, for fear of real blood pumping in their hearts and in the trembling hands of custom, bound by ropes holding most mortals under its liquid marble. Lawn Boys. For 7 summers I worked with 2 teacher friends in our company, Skokie Valley Landscaping. Lawn Boys. Their trucks ride the suburban landscape loaded with plantings, wheelbarrows, shovels, bow saws, sledgehammers, seed, tan bark, sod, crowbars, edging, trimmers, lunchboxes, and pop, ready to rumble on land not their own, to work fast without waste because that's the only way to survive, to move together, create magic in yards ignored by occupants who move even faster, never seen their gardens or who built them, when holes filled with 200-pound balls of coiled roots to support trees put in just the right place for sun exposure, drainage, contrast, energy, color, texture, considered over seasons never to be felt by those who live through them, unaware of underground beauty when roots get water and lawn boys go to work. Prairie Moon. In 2001, I became a partner at the Prairie Moon restaurant in Evanston, beginning a long association with a wonderful staff and an appreciation for the hard work that goes into restaurant work. Front and back of the house, serving or cooking, all difficult. Prairie Moon. Its soft light, gray, blue, and yellow, enriches shadows and flowing fields of grain, moving to land tides of wind. Deep in our past, the prairie moon soothed our spirits, gave understanding to our labor, mystery to our imagination. We still seek those nights, standing alone in ourselves, looking out over what we have accomplished, what we may, finding harmony in this moment before the tide moves on. Green Valley, Arizona. Funeral and Dad's pipes. Funeral. My father's burial high up on the Santa Rosa Mountain, Arizona. Funeral. When we broke through a small stand of pine onto a gentle ridge that looked out over the vast purple-hazed valley below, we knew it was the right place. We dug a good-sized hole, softly put in the box of ashes, and then opened the bandana sack, placing its contents next to Dad, his old compass, his favorite hunting knife, and a beer mug we had given him on his 70th birthday, engraved with, "May our feet always rest under your table." The compass had directed us on our many hunting and fishing trips in South Dakota and Canada. The hunting knife had gutted thousands of pheasant and walleyed pike. The beer mug had toasted our history together, our feet under one table. Dad's pipes. These were my gift from my dad. Dad's pipes. When Dad died, he left me his pipes, and I have smoked them with pleasure until a burning hole appeared in each. Tonight, the last pipe glowed horizontally, breathing out like a smoker's tracheotomy. And I remember the story of Dad driving across the night desert in a Model A Ford, following the distant taillights of another, until he realized his own pipe had burnt through and danced orange in the black of his windshield. As I tapped out the ash from this last pipe, I found comfort in the illusions we follow through the vastness of night's desert, alone with a reflected glow we create. Arnhem Land and Tasmania, Australia. Poems, Dreamtime, Devils. Dreamtime. Barb and I made many trips to see our always loved, sometime faraway daughter, Kara, and to experience Australia and Tasmania, camping with and toasting Aussies in the vastness of a wonderful land. Dreamtime. When Aborigines walked in the bush of Arnhem Land, they did not walk alone. For ancestors whispered in echoes from baskets beautifully woven by tiny green ants that provided protein when crushed and eaten, and tasted of delicate lime, the juice from a female spirit, who, when smelled, purified the soul with her sense power. Everything spoke with the importance of its own existence. The stinging bush inflamed the flesh, but its anecdote, the elephant leaf, always grew at its side, its only balm. For 40,000 years, The Aborigines have listened to these voices and honored their truths. But now, echoes come from bars on Charcoal Lane, where Victoria Bitter diminishes that history, clouds its vision, kills its relevance. In the morning, men lie in gutters and lift eyes towards a sun that no longer awakens the soft secrets of little green ants. Devils. This is in Tasmania, encountering the motorcycle gang, the Tasmanian Devils. Devils. The devils ride with their wives in full leathers across the empty highways of Tasmania, invading bars built by prisoners long dead for crimes of property, sentenced 7 years to Port Arthur's hard labor via London's slums. Proud Irish, whip me fair, sir, nothing on the neck. The pub stone walls are mute from these old hands now resurrected by cyclists waving goodbyes through windows veiled in delicate curtains of lace. Harrison Street, Evanston. Poems Marriage, Round the Block. Marriage. This is my marriage poem written for our son, Scott, and our wonderful daughter-in-law, Laura. Marriage. Like everything, marriage evolves into different forms, some soft and malleable, some hard and unforgiving. River and rock, smoke and steel, mist and mountain, all held together by an acceptance of change, growth within the shifting ideal of love. For therein all opposites become one, rock dissolving into river, steel hissing into smoke, mountains erupting into mist. All states existing but a second that changes itself each time you look into each other's eyes. Protean blue and shifting gray silently reverse themselves, and soon you are staring at yourself in your other and loving what you have become through a complexity of life, careers, children, humiliation, aging, success, death, elation, fatigue, resurgence, confusion, betrayal, commitment, sadness, creativity, courage, detachment, pain, and joy. So, man and wife, there is no permanence, no legal document that will hold the enormity of what you will become in each other. Rivers will reverse themselves and become mossed boulders. Smoke will come down from clouds and form molten red steel, and mist will inhale itself into the pink granite of mountains. All is possible, all, every time you look into each other's eyes. Round the Block. This is my poem for Barb, my extraordinary wife, friend, and soulmate for 60 years, accompanying me block by block through this life. Round the Block. 55 years walking together around blocks of families come and gone. Additions, teardowns, felled elms, lives raised and rebuilt into crypts for TVs and automatic garage doors that hide neighbors for years, suddenly glimpsed from afar, but quickly lost in another decade of silent hiding. Only we, man and wife, keep meeting ourselves, coming in the opposite direction as our witnesses, still holding hands on concrete miles of change. To conclude, Thank you for listening to my stories. God bless you all, riding your own horses with Lady Luck at your side, and riding besides her a third horse, the Mitchells, cheering you, waving to you with our spirits, our love, our blessings for your journey, your stories. On this life ride, all is possible. All. Thank you. My biography, read by Kate Burns.
Bruce Mitchell grew up outside of Kansas City and St. Louis, Missouri. He went to 6 schools, worked as a grease monkey in his father's Cummins diesel garage, and spent summers working and fishing in Canada and Alaska. He spent 1 year at the Université de Caen in Normandy, France, graduated from Washington University in St. Louis, worked for diesel accessories and engineering in Chicago, and then, after earning an M.A. in English from Roosevelt University in Chicago, began a 32-year career as an English teacher at Evanston Township High School in Evanston, Illinois. During that time period, he also worked as a landscaper, coached the ETHS Rugby Club, and completed a Ph.D. in English and Education at Northwestern University. He is presently a partner at the Prairie Moon Restaurant and sharing retirement with his wife of 60 years, Barbara. They have been blessed with a son and a daughter, both extraordinary, of course, and 6 grandchildren, all extraordinary, of course.